Welcome, everyone. The presentation will begin shortly. This session will be recorded and it will last 60 minutes with about 45 minutes of presentation, followed by time for questions and answers. Please keep your microphone muted during the presentation and turn off your cameras. If you have a question or comment, enter it in the chat during the presentation and it will be addressed during the question and answer period. You may also ask questions with video during the question and answer portion. All participants in today's event will have access to the recorded version, which will be available within 1 week after the live event. My name is Joshua Gordon, and I will be the moderator for today's presentation. TESOL International Association Speech, Pronunciation, and Listening Interest section is pleased to present this webinar titled Bridging Teaching and Practice, Action Research in Second Language Perception. Our speaker today is Dr. Chisato Kojima, who is an assistant professor at Illinois Wesleyan University. We are very pleased to welcome all of you to this webinar, and now I'll hand it over to our speaker.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking your time today to come to my talk. Let me start with my self-intro or personal background. So I learned English as a foreign language in Japan until my mid-20s, and I'm still learning English. I never lived in the United States. Now I live in the States, but English is a second language and then hard language to learn. And then I got master's and doctorate degree in linguistics in the States. I started to teach Japanese as a foreign language as a graduate teaching assistant. And then I was very interested in how learners are processing sound contrasts that are not in their part of the first language. So I was doing theoretical linguistic framework in phonology, related to sounds, but then I make a shift of my research interest from theoretical linguistics to second language acquisition. So that's how I got to be involved in second language acquisition in the end. So my current goal of my research is to increase efficiency in students' learning. So I'm teaching Japanese at my current institution, Illinois Wesleyan University, and then also Japanese culture, and then linguistics. So to make the most for my students to learn Japanese, I wanted to know what's going on with my students, and then think about how we can enhance students' learning based on the result from my research. But as many of you know already, there has been a discrepancy between research and practice. So my hope is that, we are making a bridge between research and practice, so that is my entire goal of what we do, what I do. Then, I got to know the word action research. Action research as a part of the more general movement towards teacher research has become increasingly prevalent in the field of English language teaching, ELT, over the last 2 decades. So this is a moment, what I do or what we do is actually having a term or a word. So most of you are probably a teacher, and then probably some of you are doing research, or some of you are doing both research and teaching. But I think, what we wanted to do in the end as a teacher is trying to help students, trying to make the best out of what we do as a teacher. So in my talk today, I wanted to share what I do for research and teaching. So I will focus on observation, approach through the second language acquisition perspective, and then develop the course materials or the classroom activities. It doesn't have to be new, but then hopefully we can re-examine the existing classroom activities that what we do through the lens of the second language acquisition. So let me move on to the first step, observation. So intuitively, we all know the way we acquire language as a first language and then the second language are totally a different issue. In this talk, some of the second language learner specific patterns in perception will be explored. But let's say if you're English teacher, you might be encountered so many students struggle some sound contrasts that are not in their first language. As for me, I'm learning English as a second language, and then L and R, this is a typical example, it was really hard to perceive and then distinguish. And then in the written form, I still make mistake in spelling. So lock and rock are really hard to perceive. And then if you're a native speaker of Spanish learning English, bit and beat are really hard. In other second language contexts, if your target language is Spanish and then your first language English, caro and caro, expensive and car might be really difficult. Or stress pattern in Spanish might be really hard for you, like bebe versus bebe, right? So baby and drink. So those are the struggles teacher always notice, but how we approach in second language acquisition study or what we do in a classroom might have a different approach. So that student struggles from my classroom in Japanese is also the same. So I'm going to talk about length contrast in Japanese. So hopefully not many people know Japanese, but probably I can explain what's going on with my students. So Japanese length is phonemic. For example, phonemic means they have a difference in meaning when you change the sound, right? So sake means Japanese saki and saka means slope. So that's the vowel difference. E and a makes a difference in meaning. The same thing happens to the length. So when you say saka, that means slope. But when you are prolonging a sound a little bit longer, saka with a silence, that means a rider. So those are what I mean by length contrast. And then that is phonemic. In English, length is not phonemic. So there is a short and long sound such as fit and feet. But there is something else other than length, in this specific case, vowel quality, that makes this pair distinguishable. So length only is not phonemic. So let me talk about a little more about types of Japanese length contrast. So there are consonantal length contrasts. So single consonant versus long consonant. Kita means north. Kita means cut in the past tense. Vowel length there are also vowel length contrasts. So kita means north. And then kita with a prolonged version means listened in the past tense. So as you can see in this slide, long consonants or long vowel are the part of the vowel conjugation. So it's very critical for students to know what is short, what is long, and then also what is long consonants and long vowel. And this is a recursive mistakes or repetitive mistake over the years that I noticed. So first of all, in section A, you can see short versus long consonant mistakes. So where student had to say with a short vowel, mite, to see, student would often say mite with a long consonant. Where they had to say long consonant, kitte, they will shorten, and then that makes a different vocabulary in Japanese. So kitte means to cut, kite means to come. So ribbon wo kitte kudasai means cut the ribbon, but then student would say come to the ribbon with a short form. In section B, you will see the mistakes for short versus long vowel contrast. So where student had to say shukudai, homework, they will pronounce as shukudai or spell with long vowel, extra vowel. Whereas when they had to spell with a long vowel, they will spell with a shortened version. It doesn't really make sense. So you have to say Osaka with a long vowel, but then students tend to say Osaka or spell with a short vowel. The last tricky part comes from the confusion between long consonants and long vowels. So where they had to say kite, listen, they would say kitte. Kitte sounds like to cut. And then when they have to say bed, beddo, they will say bed with a long vowel. So what's going on with students' mistake? It's apparently showing us the confusion, first of all, between short versus long contrast. And then what makes it more difficult is they have confusion with the long consonants and long vowel. So now we are moving on to step 2. What can we do to approach this issue from the recursive mistake or repetitive mistake from the students? So in the first place, it's apparently difficult for my students, but what do you mean by difficult? So I wanted to approach to this, what you mean by difficult, by 2 different approach or perspectives. First, can learners detect the physical difference between long and short? Say short and long vowel, short versus long consonants versus long vowel. So that corresponds to our experiment 1 section. And then also there is a possibility that they can detect the physical difference, but then they cannot distinguish when it comes to perceive as a Japanese word. So can learners distinguish words that contain short and long consonants or long consonants and long vowel? So that will correspond to the experiment 2. So now we are moving on to the experiment 1. It's called ABX task or discrimination task. Again, this is a reminder. So this is a question I have for the 1 approach. Can learners detect the physical difference between short and long sounds? So it doesn't really involve the processing of connection between meaning and sound yet. It's just a physical detection of long versus short kind of differences. I had 15 advanced learners in a 300 level or above at the public university in the Midwest, 19 beginners in the 100 level at the same university, and then 16 native speakers as a control group. As for the procedure, participants are having 12 dissyllabic non-words triad. For example, mete, mete, mete. So again, these are not a word in Japanese. It's a nonsense word or non-word because they don't really need to know the meaning or perceive as a word. So it's just a pure detection of the difference between short and long. Recorded by 2 female native speakers. And then we had 144 test trials. Participants were asked to decide whether the last one they heard is similar to the first sound that they heard or the second one. So that's why it's called A, B, and X. So there are always 3 chunks of sounds, and then you have to decide the last one is the same with the first or the second in the computer monitor, and they will just hit A or B in the computer. So the conditions, as we just talked about, we have consonants, long consonant versus short consonant. So they will hear mete or mete, the short and long consonants. That's labeled as geminate condition. And then we have long vowel condition. So mete versus mete with a long vowel. And the mixed condition is where they're comparing mete versus mete, so the long consonant versus long vowel. So this is what we can visualize what's going to happen to the participants. So for the long consonant condition, the participants will hear something like mete, mete, and mete. Now you have to decide mete is similar to the first one or the second one. In this case, the last one is the same with the first one. So participant hits A, that's the correct answer or response. For the long vowel condition, participants will hear something like mete, mete, mete. In this case, the last one corresponds to the second one. So the participants hopefully will hit B in the button. The mixed condition, similar to the other conditions, but mete, mete, mete. Now, the last one corresponds to A in this case. So the participants are expected to hit A in this case. Control condition, on the other hand, doesn't involve any of the long or short contrast. So usually the vowel difference or voicing difference. For the example here in the slide, moki, moke, and moki. The last one, moki, corresponds to the first one, moki. So in this case, it's a vowel difference, not the length difference. And then other times they have moki, moke, moke, and then the last one corresponds to the second one. So that's what participants went through. And then here is the result by condition for the accuracy rate. In this slide, the black bar stands for the native speaker's accuracy. And then the darker gray stands for the advanced learners. And then light gray bars stands for the beginners. And then on the left columns, that is the result for long vowel versus long consonants. And then the middle columns that representing short versus long consonant. And then the right columns will represent short versus long vowel. As you can see, native speakers on the black bars representing the highest accuracy, followed by advanced learners. And then beginners will have a lowest accuracy rate, as you can see in this slide. And then those group difference is, significantly different. Or the statistically significant. And then, as you can see in this slide, representing the response time. So again, the black bar represent native speakers. Darker gray represent advanced learners, and then the light gray represent beginners. And then here for the response time, the bar is shorter for native speakers. That means native speakers will quickly respond, followed by beginners, and then advanced learners are the slowest. So what we can say from this experimental result is native speakers are accurate and fast. They have no problem with this task. Beginners are less accurate, but as fast as native speakers. Yet they had high accuracy rate overall. So even though they are beginners, they still scored more than 80 or around 80% of the accuracy. And for the advanced learners, as they are as accurate as native speakers. So as accurate, by what I mean by as accurate as, it's a statistical significance. So there is no significance in statistical analysis. So that means, they're on par with the native speakers, but then they are significantly slower than the native speakers. Or so that means those processing difficulties are shown by the slower response time. So, they are accurate, but then they have to think about it. Like, okay, so what is this? Is this similar to first one or the second one? So they are taking time to be accurate. But then when it comes to the accuracy, they are the same accuracy rate with the native speakers. So they are doing good. And for learners, vowel length contrasts were easier than consonantal length contrast within a single language. I'm not the first one to tell you the vowels length contrasts are easier than the consonantal length contrast. So there is a previous study telling you vowel discrimination task is better than the consonantal length task, if you're interested. Now we are moving on to the second part of the question. So what happens if learners to process incoming sound as a second language word? So we have the same exact participants, and then with a different set of experiments. So we had 10 trials, distractors, test stimuli. So what they are going to do is they hear either word or non-word and ask to decide whether what they heard is a Japanese word or not. So they are accepting or rejecting what they hear as a word of Japanese. As for the choice of the vocabulary used in the experiment, I used the vocabulary from the textbook. So hopefully they're in the same institution. And if you're taking Japanese language from 101, 201, 301, as you get advanced in the course, I hope they remember those vocabulary from the textbook. So they should be familiar by the time they will get to 301 or 401. And destructors are constructed by changing one feature not relevant to the length contrast. For example, oto means sounds, and then I just change the voicing feature, and odo means nothing in Japanese, it's unknown word. And test stimuli, test known word were constructed by changing original length of the word or type of length. I will talk about details for what I did. So for example, we have a word without any long consonants or vowel. And then from this word tatsu, to stand, I lengthened, I made a long consonants or long vowel counterparts so that those are consisting known word test stimuli. If a original word is with the long consonants, I will shorten or replace with a long vowel. So this is what I mean by changing the type of length. Originally, long consonants replaced with a long vowel, and that becomes a known word. If the original word is with long vowel, I will shorten or I will replace long vowel with a long consonant. So that's how I made the original word from the textbook and then two corresponding known words as a test stimuli. So this is a general result for this second experiment. Overall control condition was better than test word regardless of the group. So that means, anything that doesn't involve long or short kind of contrast, they're doing better overall. And then also there are tendency that words are better than non-words across the group. So everybody was doing well when it comes to the encounter of word and then saying this is a word or not. There are main effect of group. So let's take a look at group by group kind of accuracy rate here. Native speaker, as you can see in this slide, have no problem with whatsoever. So native speaker had ceiling performance, meaning above 90%, 96% accuracy, regardless of the condition, test or condition, or word or non-word. Whatever they encounter, they can correctly accept or reject a word in Japanese or not. Result for the beginners, as you can see here, you can see words, either control word or test word are better than non-word. And if you remember what happened to beginners in the first experiment, overall beginners are accurate above or around 80% accuracy for the first task when they are asked to decide, is this the same or not kind of task. But when it comes to process incoming sounds as a word, their accuracy rate really dropped. And for the test known word, it's even lower than the chance level. So the chance level is 50%. So, it's a 50% chance of what you can get correct or not. It's lower than the chance level. As for the advanced learners, anything that is a word, either a test word or a control word, they are doing good. And statistically, there is no difference between native speakers and advanced learners. But when it comes to the non-word, the accuracy rate dropped. And then for the test non-words, they are the worst. So, so this is where we have difference, in terms of the type of the experiment and then type of the, how can I say, lexical status, word or non-word really matters for learners. Whereas native speaker doesn't really care about whether it's a word or not. They can correctly accept or reject what they hear. So I'm going to focus on the result for the advanced learners because we can see they are advanced in a sense, they are the same accuracy or there's no difference in terms of accuracy rate for words. So they achieve the, perception for words in Japanese, but then yet they are struggling with non-word part. So I will talk about more details for the advanced learners from now on. So if you remember what I did for making a test stimuli, we have always a word as an, test word. Those test words are including word without any long consonants or long vowel that is labeled as origin S, short. And then those words with long consonants is labeled as origin G. And then those words with a long vowel, such as apato, apartment, is labeled as origin L. So from those origin, the actual word, I made two known words. So for example, tatsu, to stand, that doesn't involve any long consonant or long vowel. I made it longer, for example, with long consonant tatsu or long vowel tatsu. Those are the test words that are known word. And then for the word with a long consonant, I shortened or replaced long consonants with a long vowel, like kipu. Kipu is not a word in Japanese. And for the word that comes with a long vowel, I would shorten or replace with a long consonant. So originally the word is apato with a long vowel, now replaced with apato with a long consonant or shortened apato. So those are the sets of the test stimuli, known word I used. So the result, more specific result focusing on advanced learners, test known word. As you can see in the slide, blue bar stands for the word originally doesn't have any long consonants or long vowel. And then if I make those words into a long consonants, that is a known word that is labeled as condition L. If I prolong with a long consonant, that is labeled as origin S and condition G. If you can see pink bars that represent originally a word with a long vowel, and then when it's shortened, it's labeled as condition S. For example, apato becomes apato with a short vowel, and that is labeled as origin L, condition S. If I had long vowel, word with a long vowel, replaced with the long consonants, apato becomes apato, in this case, labeled as condition G. And finally, green bar represents originally word with the long consonants. And then I either shorten, that is labeled as condition S, or I replace with the long consonant with a long vowel that is represented here on 76% with a green bar, condition L. So those are the composition of the result. And then when I just smashed everything into by the origin, you will see the results look like this. So as you can see, the original word that comes with no long consonants or long vowel has the highest accuracy, followed by a word with a long vowel. And then the least accurate one are the one with originally the word with a long consonant. Statistically, origin S and origin L are different. And then origin S is a higher accuracy, and origin S and G are different, statistically significant. So that means origin S is always better or have higher accuracy compared to the word originally with the long vowel or the long consonant. But there was no difference between origin G and origin L. So what it means is something like this. So remember, we had word is always better, right? So word is always better when it comes to the perception and then rejecting or accepting as a word or non-word. Then non-word is a difficult part for learners. Native speaker doesn't have this problem. It's a learner's problem. They are still struggling with processing when it comes to sound strings or, is this a Japanese word or not? And then what is hardest is something that you have to refer to actual word in Japanese that has a new sound. In this specific case, either word with a long vowel or the word with a long consonant. And then when you can refer to a word, Japanese word, for example, akeru doesn't have any long consonants or long vowel. And then if you hear akeru or akeru, the non word with a long vowel or long consonant, where you can refer to a word without any sound. Oh, I know akeru is meaning open in Japanese. Then it has a highest accuracy. So that is what represented by this highest accuracy in origin S. So that is result from the second experiment. Now, what can we tell from those two different experiments? First of all, what we can say is how L2 learners, second language learners, will hear and detect the difference between the new sound contrast in their second language, and to store those differences in their mind or brain is totally a different scenario. So in the past, it's just said difficult. For those distinctions are difficult for learners, but then what is difficult really was not really discussed throughout in the field. So now we can say detecting the difference is easy for everybody, but then not to store those sounds in association with the word or the meaning. As you recall, in the first experiment, learners can detect physical difference between short and long consonant, short and long vowel, and long consonant and long vowel above 80% or around 80%, even if you're a beginner or of Japanese learner. So the source of the low accuracy in the second experiment stems from the tendency of learners to store those contrasts, meaning short or long, is using their familiar category that is a part of the first language. In this specific case, short consonants or short vowel. So they have to refer to those familiar category to form, oh, this is something different from what I know from the first language. And then this is what we call, or what's called asymmetric lexical encoding. And then this, my talk is about Japanese, but then this is, attested in German or French or in other languages, of course. So I'm just adding the same pattern as what second language learners would do when it comes to the new sound learning or acquisition. So finally, when it comes to the development or re-examination of existing classroom activity, what we know from those experiments is vowel length contrasts were perceived better in comparison with consonantal length contrast. So if you're focusing on just a detection of difference between short and long, or you can replace this statement with your own language teaching practice, if something is, so in this case, in my experience, I have to focus on the consonantal length contrast to boost their detection of differences between short and long. But as you also recall, the first experiment showed you that the beginners really can score 80% or around 80% accuracy anyway for detecting the difference. So what we need to have in the classroom teaching is making a connection between sound and meaning. So this is like nothing new. And then, probably you are already doing it in the classroom, but, this is where the research and then what we do or what you do is kind of connected and have a more meaning or strengths, or verify what we do is on the right track. So the actual activity, what you can, typically recall, think of as an actual teaching, activities, picture naming, and this is really not new. This is really, but then this is a direct method to make a connection between sounds and meaning. And what I do in my classroom is called Karuta game, and Karuta is from Portuguese. And then what I do in the 101 class, so Japanese has a 3 different orthography or writing system that has nothing to do with English letters or alphabet. So I'm trying to use this game to enhance the recognition of orthography in 101. But then in 102 and higher level, we can do recognition of vocabulary. So you have pictures, and then I will say some word, and then they will take the corresponding pictures. So that kind of activities. So again, this is nothing new, but then this is what we need to do or to enhance students' learning or building up their association with sound and meaning, or detection and association with or store sound and then that distinction in the second language. So far, I was talking about linear sequence of research cycle and then what I can get back to the teaching in the classroom. But then sometimes things are happening at the same time. So, while developing better classroom, activities, you can still work on other issues related to this. So for example, I started to work on high variability phonetic training. So as you saw, student doesn't have any problem with detecting the difference in Japanese sounds, but then what we need is the recognition part, and then store those things to their memory. So high variability phonetic training, probably you might heard of it already in ESL setting. So this is trendy or getting popular among ESL contexts, not for other languages yet. I mean, there are some researchers doing this. So what it means by high variability phonetic training is high variability means different talkers, genders, age, and whatnot. So oftentimes, as a teacher, our students are getting used to what we talk or how we talk, right? So usually they're getting used to my voice and getting better understanding of what's going to happen in a classroom, but then that's not actually a real life experience. You will see a lot more varieties in speech. So phonetic training with a high variability is trying to let students expose with different voices and then let them generalize what's going on with the different contrast or what to focus. So the training uses L2 words, the actual words, and then we usually focus on difficult contrast that is proved by difficult in research. So if you're interested, there is the comprehensive kind of paper on ESL context for HBPT. And then this is not my only research agenda, but then I'm working with French teacher and Spanish teacher and with the other institutions. So this will be a whole another research topic and talk. So I'm not going to talk about details, but if you're interested, actually I'm incorporating HBPT as a homework assignment so that students doesn't have to take time during the class period, yet they can practice those perceptual training by their own pace as a homework assignment. And it seems like it's working, especially for Japanese case with my institutions and then other institutions. And that's the same results for Spanish and French. So actually we presented at the AAAL conference. So if you're interested, just talk to me. So those are the selected references, and thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Hisato. And now we open the floor to questions. Let's see if any of our participants has any questions they would like to ask. I do have a couple of questions. The first one is, did the students actually notice any improvement in their perception? Did you hear from them after you implemented these things? Did they mention that they improved something?
There was a questionnaire part, and then this talk, the data are collected by me, but then I'm not teaching them. Of course, I cannot teach them while I'm collecting data. But what I do for my current institution, you know, they have questionnaire at the end, and then at the moment after I'm done with teaching and then the grades are submitted, then I can open up the data as anonymous data, you know. So according to students, they can feel, you know, it was useful, but then actual, how can I say, data, they don't have any idea of how they do good or, you know, better than the first trial or whatnot.
Okay.
So that is one of the things we have to be really careful for the action research, right? So, you know, it shouldn't affect any of the grading or course grade, you know.
Okay, so we have one question here. It says, your graphs with levels of learners would say they are overcoming difficulties with the contrast beyond high variability phonetic training. Have you found a good way to facilitate learning in this type of contrast in the classroom? It says, I'm particularly thinking about it from the orthographic side. Does this affect learning, or are students misguided by visual input?
So HBPT was totally a different issue, and then it was not a, you know, main part of my talk. And then it was not a training. So like, you know, so I didn't, how can I say, my talk doesn't really involve the results of how I did or incorporate the activities that should enhance, you know, this, how can I say, enhancement of the perceptual ability to enhance their, you know, L2 distinction. But then I incorporate the pronunciation practice, and then, you know, their pronunciation got better. I mean, I don't have any stats result or anything, but then when I incorporate pronunciation activities, you know, during the classroom or during the office hour, their perception actually got better when they can pronounce better or they notice what's going on with the thing that they're doing. For example, length contrast. So yeah, I cannot give you the definite answer for this, but there should be some effect, knowing that what should work through the research.
Okay. Let's see if there are any other questions.
Probably it's the best or the busiest time of the, you know, course or semester. And thank you so much for coming to the talk today, everybody.
I do have another question.
Sure.
What recommendations would you give for teachers who want to implement action research in their classes?
So as for the Spanish, French, and Japanese, we are trying to set up the websites where teachers can register and then use for their coursework, hopefully soon, but it's gonna take a little while. We are making a website. So we use a really basic website to, you know, implement HBPT in a classroom or coursework for our each, you know, institution. But then we wanted to do it for as a open resource, education resource, you know. So those people are coming if you're teaching French, Spanish, and Japanese.
Okay. Any other questions from our participants? Okay. So this brings us to the conclusion of today's webinar, Bridging Teaching and Practice, Action Research in Second Language Pronunciation. A special thank you to our presenter, Dr. Chisato Kojima. And this concludes the webinar. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much for coming.